Hello everyone, I hope you're having a great day. So, I just wanted to talk a little bit about something that I've kind of noticed lately with certain model releases, especially of, I guess you could say, established characters from earlier in the game. Honestly, this one is just kind of just me, picking my own brain and kind of just talking about like some trends I'm seeing. I'm also not necessarily saying these trends are bad. It's just something that I've kind of been noticing lately, especially with how GW is dealing with their established material, especially the older material. So one thing I've noticed, we've definitely been starting to see a greater trend of model change-ups, like especially with like the design and lore, and in some cases lore change-up of established models. Like for example, we just quite recently we've seen changes in, let's say, like Ionis Cryptborn. He's now sitting on a dragon. We're seeing some older characters start to come back in lore, like Vandus Hammerhand and other characters who we haven't seen pretty much since early first edition. But what I really want to touch on is the new Black Talon model. Specifically that her along with some new characters. Well, they're not necessarily new, but they were in the lore, but now are finally getting models. Kayis and Toll. I've noticed that they're getting updated models, but in some ways that are actually changing up like established lore and published material regarding those particular characters. In addition to ways that essentially, like, I can't really think of another word. Essentially, retcon the earlier established material for these two sets of models, like not just changing up their backstories, but also changing up their appearances of them. Now I'll just get into more detail here. I'm not saying that GW never does this. Of course, they've done this in the past with many characters going through many revisions and visual updates, but I'm a little bit surprised on the timing of this, considering that some of these are relatively newer established characters. For example, Black Talon was only really introduced relatively recently, only in the last, I'd say, like 4 or 5 years. I think she was originally just essentially the head swap option for a named character for the knight Zelstros, I believe it is, for the Stormcast Eternals. But she was important enough to have her own her own backstory created, and she was also the main character in the box set in the past, where she was facing off against the newly released Horticus Slimix, the Nurgle character, the one who's riding on a snail. I can never remember their names, but she was established in the box set, and she even got her own novel, Black Talon First Mark, which established who she was before she became a Stormcast, and her ties to the Maggotkin of Nurgle and also the Sylvaneth. However, when I heard she was getting her own Warhammer Plus show, I was actually very excited because, one, it was the first big budget Age of Sigmar Warhammer Plus show. Plus, it was about Black Talon too, and I thought, a Stormcast Eternal Assassin. Well, that's something definitely to talk about. However, when I actually saw the show, and I've noticed some other people as well, kind of noticed that the show kind of changed up her established backstory of the character, not just, and also I would arguably say her appearance a little bit as well. She's definitely portrayed with a somewhat different armor set, and definitely and also a much different backstory as well. Because, for example, that whole thing I was telling you about with her backstory in the novel Black Talon, which technically was supposed to be her backstory in that Black Library novel, very little of that is referenced in the show. In fact, events depicted of her backstory in the show actually directly contradicts, well, I guess not directly, but very heavily contradict lore established in the older material, especially the Black Talon First Mark book. In addition to that, characters established, like her friends and associates in that book, are nowhere to be seen in the show. In fact, they're actually outright replaced with newer newer characters. Like, for example, you probably saw her model release where she's now in a grouping of, the Black Talons. There's all those different characters, and even an Iden Deepkin mercenary in there. Those are relatively recent. Those were never brought up before. Those basically just existed when the show came up. And apparently the new book also, Black Talon, comes up, is going to be moving forward with the web series new continuity. So this is actually quite interesting in that they would retcon a character that quickly. My personal belief is that I think when they decided to go with like a grouping of models, and when they did so. They did so in a way that let me just get my thoughts together. Basically, what happens is they created this whole new hero squad with Black Talon as the beginning, but they just realized they never established all the other characters, like the Iden Deepkin hero, the Sharpshooter Stormcast, all of them. So they decided to just retcon the other stuff. And now I kind of feel like this is kind of a trend I'm starting to see. And if it was just Black Talon, I would say it's a one-off, but it technically isn't a one-off. And by that I mean Kayis and Toll. So for those who might not be aware, Kayis and Toll are actually a relatively well-established characters in the background. Like they're to those who might not know, they are a witch hunter pair for the Order of Azir, who, do witch hunter stuff, like hunting down vampires and heretics and chaos, etc., etc. And they've had several stories and books written about them over the last few years. In fact, actually, one of their novel, The Silver Shard, is actually one of the better books in the series. And their debut appearance in Cities of Secrets is actually well regarded within the community. I personally liked the characters, but I didn't think they were going to get beyond just, background material level. By that, I mean, I thought they'd just get more stories here and there, but I wasn't expecting them to get a model this soon. Not saying that they weren't ever going to, it's just I thought it would be like in the next 5 years or something. But they actually got quite a bit of exposure recently. Like, for example, they got their own special on Hammer and Bolter for Warhammer Plus, and they even got some models coming. However, one thing that I did notice when watching the show was that they got some personality and even appearance rewrites by the looks of it. Like one of the biggest things I noticed right away was, well, one thing is their appearances have definitely been changed. So generally speaking, people went with their appearances as they were established on the cover of the book, The Silver Shard. But when they were first presented in quote unquote live action with the animation, they had some drastic changes. Like, for example, Kayis especially had a very different appearance than what he was when he was initially established. Like his hair was different, his voice was not voice, but I mean, but he was much bulkier. And his personality was different, and that also went for Toll as well. Like he looked older. He didn't have a beard anymore. He was much more jovial, which ironically meant that they actually kind of switched personalities. In the original book, Hanover Toll, that was always kind of portrays, the more dour, grim, more serious witch hunter, while his new recruit, Kayis, he was the more jovial of the two. But now, from their appearance in the show, now they're actually, it's now Kayis is the one who seems to be grim and quick to anger, while Toll, he's the one, now he seems to be the more lighthearted of the two. And again, his appearance is definitely different. Like they lost their beards, they look older. And for example, and Kayis has much darker skin than he was portrayed in the thing, even though he was always described as darker skinned. His portrayals in the older material didn't show it as to this degree. And having said all that, I have to admit, I think I actually do prefer the newer showing of them. I don't know. I just felt while their older portrayals I didn't think were bad, but I just kind of felt, the whole grim veteran with, wet behind the ears, new recruit, who's more harder than him. I don't know. Those are just some tropes that I think maybe I've seen too much of. I'm not saying they're bad, but maybe I'm just being exposed to that dynamic a little too much. I'm getting a little tired of it. I don't know. I just kind of felt I liked the newer, how they were portrayed in the newer one, just their personalities and their dynamic. But again, having said all that, there's no real denying that this really does feel like, in fact, even more so than Black Talon, this really does feel like a significant retcon to the older material. Like not even just that, but just again, their whole their friend group. Like, for example, characters in the animation and the new models coming, like we're seeing characters here that were never established before. Like they are, and characters that were established in the older material aren't referenced at all either. And it kind of just jumps out that I think what happened was, in this regard, they had some models that were coming along the way that they didn't, but as the models were nearing completion, they probably realized they didn't really consult with the old artists when they were doing the art for those books and other material. So they kind of had to change up their appearances to better correlate to what the models look like. And it kind of maybe seems like the writers for the animation probably didn't read as heavily as much of the older material, or if they did, maybe they just mixed them up, because again, from what I'm watching in the animation and what I was reading before, they essentially switched personalities and even appearances to a certain extent. So it's kind of hard not to. And they have a new book coming out, Kayis and Toll, which I'm probably pretty sure is just going to, like similar to Black Talon, is just going to retcon the older books. And again, I'm not necessarily saying this is bad, but I'm surprised. Like I don't know how I feel yet about them necessarily making certain aspects of the fiction non-canon, for lack of a better term. And in addition to this too, again, with the whole, again, lightning is striking more than once here, in that we're getting yet another hero squad. Like, for example, Black Talon got one, now we're getting Kayis and Toll. Like, I always knew they were going to get models, but I wasn't expecting them to come with like a whole posse. And probably you have to take them all to, play them on the table. So again, this is definitely a trend I'm seeing with GW, not just releasing heroes, but entire hero squads. Meta reason is obviously probably just to make you have to buy the whole more models in order to use your favorite characters. but that's kind of par for the course. So overall, so to describe what I've kind of been seeing here, there's definitely now becoming a trend with GW, essentially not being hesitant to just outright retcon aspects of, aspects and material that were relatively recently released to push newer material. So as mentioned, like Black Talon's backstory was basically completely changed up, and Kayis and Toll, well, their appearances and personalities are completely different than they were before, and like I said, there's a whole bunch of new material coming that more or less, retcon some of the previous books. And again, some of those books are pretty well liked in the general community, as far as I can tell right here. And as I was mentioning, I don't necessarily think the changes are bad. In fact, I actually think I like Black Talon more in the change-ups. I think her personality and dynamic is much better than before, where she, when she was just, the loner assassin. And Kayis and Toll, I think they have a much more interesting dynamic than I think was portrayed in the past. But like I said, I don't know how I feel about them, basically just writing off sort of like previous public artwork and published previously canon material, because again, because if they're willing to just write, because if they're willing just to write things off this quickly, it kind of makes you wonder, well, how is is your favorite aspects of the canon safe in the long term? You know, because I'm not saying GW has never retconned material ever. No, far from it. They've retconned a lot of material, but generally speaking, I tend to find they kind of did so over a much longer period of time. Case in point right here, Black Talon's book is only like a few years old. Now it's already obsolete. And Kayis and Toll right here, again, their books came out relatively recently. Now it's already getting retcons. And I think we're even going to probably start seeing some levels of retcons to Ionis Cryptborn and Vandus Hammerhand when they show up again in the narrative. I'm just kind of torn. Like, even if I like the changes made, I don't know how I feel about them kind of just being, flippant about just changing things on a whim. And again, and as mentioned, I do think I understand why. Like, for example, Kayis and Toll is probably a very easy one. The model designers probably didn't coordinate much with the Black Library writers or the artists who did the pictures for the books. So ultimately they didn't look the same as when the models were released. And at the end of the day, GW has to support the models over the artwork, so they had to basically retcon that. But it also definitely shows different writers' interpretations of the characters. Because again, as it's been established, writers for GW and Black Library don't really communicate with each other much, so it can lead to personality differences between mediums. But again, this is not just author interpretation. This is just flat out changing stuff. So I wonder where this is going to go into the future. Because again, Age of Sigmar is still a relatively recent new IP. So I wasn't really expecting them to be this gung ho with making changes to established lore and even books. At least not this early. But anywho, and again too, as I pretty much mentioned before, the whole command squad style hero grouping, that's pretty simple. They're just trying to, it's really just to get you to buy more models. Like, I know they're gonna say stuff like, oh, bringing more characters from the books into them, but okay, but can we take only two of the models, or we need them all? Oh no, you need them all. Okay, so we know why it is. No, it's just probably just to get people to buy the whole squad, not just their favorite model. But anywho, in that regard, I'm also kind of wondering. I wonder if they're going to be pushing that trend to other armies too. So I know it all started with the Gabapalooza, but I wonder if it'll spread beyond just the Stormcast and the cities of Sigmar. Will we see command groupings for also the Night Haunt, or I don't know, maybe the Iron Jaws even, I don't know, I don't even know what that would even look like, but I feel like if this becomes a trend, we're gonna see this a lot more soon. But anyway, I'm starting to ramble. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a great day.